The future is here already. It's just not evenly distributed. Yet. Today's world teems with innovation. The nexus of hardware, software, and human ingenuity promises a revolution in possibilities. What does tomorrow look like? Witness Future Proof.
Eric Kavanagh here, your host. So excited to be closing up the year with a bang here, just like the band. Let's go out with a bang. We're now in 3 new big markets. Very excited about Philadelphia, Boston, and New York. I've heard that if you could make it there, you can make it anywhere. And today we're going to talk about data catalogs, the formerly missing link, I'm calling it, the data catalog. We've had business glossaries in the data world for decades, for multiple decades, right? For a long time now. But in the early days, it was all offline. It was in a manual somewhere, or it was a spreadsheet that someone hopefully would read to sort of manually try to understand what was going on. But in the last probably 7 or 8 years, things have really changed. And there are some very exciting technologies now that are helping weave together the whole data picture for organizations. We call them data catalogs. There are a number of different ways you can do it, but we have a couple analysts on the call today. Rick Sherman, I mentioned, and my buddy Sarbjeet Johal is here as well. And Juan Cicada from a company called Data.World that is very forward-looking and has, I think, the right recipe to do this the way it should be done, quite frankly. So just quickly to help people understand, data catalogs are supposed to help your business understand all the different concepts, all the different data types, all the different tables, all the information assets throughout your organization, kind of weave that all together so you can understand end to end what's really happening. They can greatly impact, of course, understanding of the business, but also data quality. For example, audit trails, things of that nature. There are lots of great benefits you get from using a data catalog effectively. But the biggest one is probably the value of the information assets themselves, because the closer you can get to the front line to optimize what is being captured, what is being leveraged, what is being used by the business, the better off you're going to be. And with that, let's bring in Juan Cicada from Data.World. Juan, tell us a bit about your company and this whole concept of a knowledge graph, which is really the foundation of your solution.
Eric, thank you very much for inviting me here. So my name is Juan Cicada. I'm the principal scientist here at Data.World. And Data.World, we are enterprise data catalog. We're the only data catalog that is fully cloud SaaS native, and it is powered by a knowledge graph. For us, our data catalog, it needs to be like what we call an information radiator. It needs to be a marketplace and a collaboration hub for all your data and analytics ecosystem that you have within the organization, right? You want people to be able to operate with clarity, accuracy, and speed. And for us, being it powered by a knowledge graph enables that all these things are completely connected. So in simple terms, knowledge graph is to be able to connect things. It's data, it's integrating data and metadata, and where you want your concepts and your relationships to be first-class citizens. And when you start thinking about your metadata, everything that you're cataloging, it's what you were describing. You got tables, you got columns, you got dashboards, you got business terminology, you got people, and then you have dashboards are derived from tables and are derived from queries. All of this stuff is connected. And for us, your first knowledge graph should be of your metadata to be able to understand that. So that's our point right here.
Yeah, I like that approach. So kind of walk us through the process and maybe share with us some of the experiences that your clients have had. Because again, to put this in context, folks, what you're trying to do is really create a meaningful lens through which you look at all the information in your organization. And anyone who's ever worked in this space knows that you walk in on day one of the job and you're like, wow, here comes the uphill learning curve to figure out what is exactly going on. What are the assets at our disposal? What can we use? What can we do with them? All that kind of fun stuff comes into play. So I love that you say your first knowledge graph should be your metadata. And of course, for our audience out there, metadata is data about data. So where is the data from? What are the fields? What is the context? That's the context piece of a data item, right? Because absent that, data is meaningless and useless. So metadata is the data about the data. And what you're describing is having the knowledge graph, and there are lots of technologies these days. There are lots of major companies that use knowledge graphs, by the way. So this is a big part of how the information age is sort of evolving. But explain to us what happens, what have you seen your customers experience in the fairly early days of using your solution?
Yeah. So I call this the crawl, walk, and run. And this is the vision that we have. Crawling is to be able to go understand what is the data that you have within the organization. And I think traditionally kind of table stakes and all types of data catalogs out there will just do your traditional tabular SQL databases, right? I need to go in and say, okay, here I got these SQL databases. These are the tables. These are the columns that they have, the data types. You can do sensitive data scanning. And if there's PII, like, oh, that's kind of this table stakes that we have in there. Additionally, you want to go scan is all different types of dashboards from BI tools and so forth, right? I got Tableau, I got Power BI and so forth. And then other types of things are just business glossary terms, all right? There's all this terminology that I have. So I think that's kind of the table stakes that we have right now that every data catalog out there will be doing. But what we really start realizing is that, first of all, there's going to be more than just tables and columns and different types of dashboards. The world is moving so quickly, right? You have people saying, I got my own proprietary type of data systems that I have. I have my own types of jobs that I have been defining. I have APIs I want to be go cataloging. There's different types of new analytical tools that we want to go connect to. So I think what you really want is the industry is going into having this flexibility of being able to go catalog so much stuff that we may know today, and there's stuff that we don't know that's going to come out tomorrow that we're going to go catalog. So you want to be able to have that flexibility, and that's something that we're seeing a lot of our customers. If customers who are I just got databases, SQL Server, Oracle, whatever, Snowflake, whatever. Yeah, that's what you have today, but you need to start preparing yourself for tomorrow and stuff that you don't know what's going to happen. That's a lot of the stuff that we're seeing with our customers, and also customers who have multiple already, they built their own types of metadata systems internally, and they realize that they need to go catalog. So we end up being a catalog for the catalogs of stuff, and even that they have existing tools, and they're all siloed by departments. So that's another trend that we're seeing, is that now every department early on started with their own little catalog, but then you start having silos of metadata that all this stuff needs to get connected. So that's that first trend that we've seen right now, is when it comes to metadata. But a lot of tools out there, they just stay at the metadata level. And my analogy is like, imagine you go shopping on Amazon and you're searching for something that you're looking, right? And you found it, you click checkout and you buy, and you paid for it. And then Amazon says, oh, go get in your car and go drive to the store to go pick up the shoes, the product, whatever that you bought. That's ridiculous. You would never, that's a horrible experience, right? You want to be able to find the data you have, request it, go through whatever governance process needs to go through, and then you want to be able to go access that data right there in that moment, right? I want to have examples of how other people are accessing that data, how are they using that. So that's when we go from the crawling to the walking step. And that walking step is I can now access the data. And for that, you need other types of, your catalog now starts to becoming not just metadata management, but doing data management too. And that's why Data.World, we do, for example, the virtualization and federation, because I want to be able to go access the data on that on-prem database that it is. I may have to go query it and combine a spreadsheet with a Snowflake and a Postgres and so forth. But once you're kind of accessing that data, what happens is that you are accessing and connecting to that data that is that raw, inscrutable enterprise data. You imagine working with an Oracle EBS system or an SAP system, right? That has thousands and thousands of tables and columns with column names that make no sense or in different languages. Like, what does that mean? And then you start asking, what does this actually mean? And that's when you start getting into that third layer, which is that crawl, walk, and run. And when you enter that knowledge layer, where I really want to be able to kind of bring in the most important business concepts and have that semantic layer that overlays over my inscrutable source databases. That's a progression that we're seeing our customers go through. We have customers who have gone through that, who are running after going through the crawling and walking step. The majority of the folks are at that crawling step, but we are giving them kind of that vision of, hey, cataloging is just the beginning. What's next after you catalog? And that's our vision, is we want to be able to go provide that knowledge layer that really connects to the business value and where that data is coming from.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you have this position of being, I want to call it a latecomer, but later than the earlier iterations, if you will. And you can always learn from what other solutions have done to kind of optimize your architecture and where you go, because in the data world, architecture is critical. right? And we've got Sarbjeet Johal is going to join us in the next segment. He can talk about that architectural component for scalability, right? Because you want to be able to scale. You don't want to start off strong and then have it fall over sideways because it wasn't designed to scale. So it sounds to me like, Juan, you folks thought through that as you designed the kernel. Is that right?
Completely. Actually, Data.World is known right now as it is. We're in the enterprise data catalog space, but the first couple of years of Data.World, we were doing, and this was the plan, was to go be like the GitHub for data. We ended up, so Data.World is right now one of the largest, if not the largest, open data community. We have 500,000 open data sets on Data.World. Anybody can go in, search, and use that. We have over a million users right now. I think 2/3 of Fortune 500 companies are users of Data.World in our open community. And what we did right there is that we designed a system, a whole platform that was going to be able to scale at a web scale. And that's why our entire ecosystem within Data.World is a knowledge graph. I mean, this is how the web is built, and that's how we interconnect data on the web and so forth. So that's how we designed the platform originally back, I think in 2015, 2016 with the original founders. And then we were like, well, okay, now that we have established a web scale architecture to be able to go manage data and metadata, one, and second, we did a lot of user experience and user testing. I mean, we do A/B testing on enterprise software. We did 1,000 releases last year. I mean, this is something that if you're truly SaaS cloud native, I mean, you should be able to go do this stuff. So that's how we prepared ourselves. And then once we were there, we were like, let's go take this to the enterprise. And that was our transition.
That's pretty impressive. I like that a lot. All right, let's bring in Rick Sherman. Stick around for the roundtable, Juan. Rick, you've been doing these information architectures for probably longer than you care to admit as well. But I probably think you share my enthusiasm for the evolution and the maturation of data catalogs as it's almost like the final step, I think, in really weaving it all together finally, because we went through all the point-to-point years and ETL scripts and manual scripting and so forth. And that, of course, that's never going away. But in terms of the big picture, the sort of Valhalla of data, if you will, I think we're almost there because these data catalogs have come so far. But what do you think, Rick?
I think that's true. I mean, a lot of pressure from businesses to get a handle on what the data really means. And we talked earlier before the show, just the definitions of things. What does customer mean? What is profit, right? There's different definitions legitimately throughout the enterprise and with your partners and with your suppliers. You need to first know what they are and then figure out where the data is and how to collaborate. I mean, we were stuck in, for a while, IT was sort of in a little cocoon, right? They had these legacy BI products that had semantic layers, and users could only go through those tools, right? So they kind of felt like they managed the data. Those days have long gone, not only because of self-service tools, because of lots of different data sources out there. People have access to things that they never had before. Business users can develop and access data. And they were always the subject matter experts for what data meant. Now they need to figure out where the data is and collaborate on the data. I think that's the other exciting thing about the data catalogs, is the ability to expand out collaboration of what data is, where it is, what it means, what it should mean. Are you getting what data you need? What else should you get at? And I think that's important. The other thing that I think is also a lot of the previous efforts with data governance, data dictionaries, business glossaries were the boil the ocean kind of deal. And a lot of the back end, let's define everything that's in those 40,000 tables in SAP. Who cares? Let's start off with what the business needs to run the business, what the metrics are, what the KPIs are, and work that way, right? The other 39,999 tables probably doesn't matter. Let's get to the core data that we need, the ABC analysis of inventory management, right? Let's get to the things that are business value and do it that way. I think that's the other thing that business catalogs got. And finally, we're not just doing manual. There's lots of ingestion of that metadata, technical, business, and other types of metadata out there. I think that's another key, because when it was manual, it was never going to get done. You really have to be proactive in getting it as soon as you can and when it changes.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I did not know the history that Juan shared with us about Data.World, that they started off with this open data approach. And, frankly, after the show, I'm going to dig into that a bit more, because I've been a huge advocate of open data for the last 20 years or so, and that's really getting somewhere as well, right? So we're kind of seeing this confluence. We talk about alternative data on this show sometimes. We're seeing a confluence of both technologies and data strategies. The data mesh concept is now really gaining some steam with folks for good reason, I think. But it's fun that we're kind of putting it all together. And I think you're right, Rick, that no matter what the scenario, no matter what your technology stack, you always want to focus on the business value first. Where does it really matter? Where are we really making our money? And to me, that was one of the blessings that came out of this whole COVID scenario, is that it forced everyone to pay attention to what they were doing. Where's our money coming from? You know, where are our people and how can they access these systems? All these questions had to be asked. And, you know, I had a guy, the chief data officer or a senior data person from a big healthcare company on the show. And he said that because of COVID, they accomplished 5 years of digital transformation in 5 months. So it shows when you get the pressure to get something done, you really can roll up your sleeves and get a lot done. And to me, again, and you mentioned the dynamic nature, Rick, that's crucial to be able to scan systems. This is what machine learning and AI are all about. Scan very complex, diverse systems, come back, give you some way to analyze that, to understand it. And then you can start hacking away at the iceberg, right, Rick?
Right, and I think some of the limiting factors before was actually people. I mean, we're talking about technology and scaling. That's certainly one of the aspects. But the subject matter experts, or the data gurus in the IT side, there's only a handful of them. And anytime anybody needed anything, that's who they went to ask what the definition is, or to try to get 60. The data for us. Right. We needed to get much more. We need to scale beyond that. So data catalogs is the way to share that institutional knowledge and spread it out, because you can't have one guru, one subject matter expert in a financial group or a marketing group be the limiting factor for you making a profit or you working on your business strategy.
Let freedom ring for the data world. We've got data.world on the show today, along with Rick Sherman, Athena IT Solutions, and Sarbjeet Johal, our Silicon Valley expert, cloud native master, Zen master. And you know a lot about information architectures too. So let's bring in Sarbjeet to comment on this. You know, we've come a long way if you look at the world of computing, which you might call enterprise computing, but it's consumer as well, really. We've just done amazing things with layers of abstraction, like you were saying in the break there, but not so much on the data side. It's still pretty fragmented over there. What do you think about all that, and how can we solve these problems for the future, Sarbjeet?
Yeah, actually, well, just like we were talking during the break, I think we have done a lot of work on the presentation layer and application, the middle tier, but on the data side, I think we are still kind of stuck with the old stack, which is mainly SQL, relational databases. But with the flood of data coming in different formats, which are not SQL-like or tabular, if you will. A lot of unstructured data is thrown at us through social media platforms and or video. Actually, by the way, on that note, the definition of data is changing. The data used to be whatever is ASCII or whatever we can read, we can look at and interpret. But now the data is sound files, the data is video, data is pictures. So we have to extract all that data from the other mediums and make it more consumable, and that's where our biggest challenge is, I believe. But even before that, I think democratization of data has a huge amount of work in front of us. We have to do that. Traditionally, the data was locked in with few folks. Even the application developers couldn't get to the data. They were given like one user ID and password through ODBC and all that stuff to get to the data, and then JDBC came in and all of the other mechanisms, and now we have the REST APIs to get to the data. But making this all sort of long story short, we haven't done a good job of creating tooling around data. We have done a great job of creating tooling around applications stack, if you will, application stack. I think the main reason for that was it's very hard for masses to get to the data. I mean, I think that is the root cause. So if a person sitting in the middle of Africa, in a village, or India, they can get to all these programming languages, and they can get to the cloud, and they can get to the tooling, but they can't get to the data. I think anybody who is putting the data sets out there, there are a lot of public data sets which are not available to the public, right? But they can be, right? The people don't know where to get the census data, where to get the for example, the vaccines data. Only few people know how to get to that. And I think, and education data, what part of the world is educated, what level, and all this stuff, right? So I think having access to those data sets goes a long way to democratize the data, and making people more sort of comfortable with playing with the data as compared to comfortable with playing with the application constructs.
A very interesting point. I mean, I think you're right about that, and I like how you reference the old way of getting access to data. It was you had a key or you had a password to get to the ODBC. Basically, that's a pretty fragile, brittle approach compared to what we need today. Now there's just too much pressure, and you can't use these manual tactics to govern access to information. In terms of the rest of all that, I mean, I guess I'd throw out one question to you. What do you think about this whole data mesh concept that's coming into play? And do you see data catalogs facilitating an effective data mesh approach to analyzing information?
Yeah, I think data mesh sort of concept has legs, if you will. It has good concepts. Like right now, I'm just looking at this book.
Yeah, there you go.
It's Zamag Degani is the person who leads this sort of narrative on the data mesh, and I follow her very closely, actually, and I think there's some theoretical, to be very honest, to be very blunt. I will criticize the approach a little bit. There's a lot of like a theoretical stuff thrown into this concept, but I think even if we can get to the 60 to 70% of what they are promising through this concept, I think we will be better off. So it's a step in the right direction, but there's a lot of theory which I think is just theory.
Yeah, that's funny. I think you're probably right about that. I mean, I'm in the media, so we're always looking forward. What's exciting is what's happening next, even though we don't know exactly what it's going to be, but we sort of postulate around that and try to understand what's coming. But there are all of these waves of innovation, I think, and that's what's so exciting and a bit bewildering about our industry, because this concept of the impedance mismatch, which we get in the database world, you could say that's in the data world period these days, vis-a-vis getting information that I want and all the different ways that I can pull that information in, all the different architectures that you can set up. It's a very different world now. I mean, it was, I think it used to be very inside out, the information architecture, and now it's trying to become outside in. And I think in a minute we'll bring Juan back in to kind of comment on that. But somewhere in the middle is where the IT department and the data people and the organization need to make decisions about which architecture they're going to use, how they're going to use this data, what they're going to do. And it's all moving targets. So it's a bit, I don't know, it's a bit precarious, I suppose. But what do you think, Sarvji?
Yeah, I think the hard part of it, let's assume we have all the tools to democratize data. What is the next challenge? The next challenge is who can get access to what? We can't give all the data to everybody out there. We cannot. That's the fact, right? So having those kind of controls in the data mesh world, I think that's the biggest challenge. You can create a data mesh theoretically. It's kind of really a mesh, like rows and columns and data going everywhere. Whoever needs data, they can get to it.
Right.
But they can't really, because I don't want my data with my healthcare provider to be shown to even a doctor who's not my doctor. So at Amazon, I don't want anybody to know what I'm buying. So I think that privacy and the security of the data collides with the accessibility of the data, and that's the real challenge. I think I don't have a a sort of magic bullet point to tell you that how we can solve that. But I
Right.
think we need to create the sort of data access mesh, if you will, versus data mesh. So like who
Interesting.
has access to what and how they are getting to it. I've been saying this for the last about 2 years that I think the future of data democratization is APIs. Once we can put something behind the API, we can measure it, we can throttle it, we can see who is getting to it,
Right.
and we can stop them if they are misusing it. All kind of stuff we can do. Right now, the data is all bulky. Like, okay, you get a file, you can launch a SQL, you get these tables. Like that is not the right approach. Even if the data is given in bulk, it should be done through APIs. I believe. I think that's the future of data democratization.
That's a very interesting point. And as I look at the data catalog space, again, I'm old enough to remember the card catalog and the Dewey Decimal System, and that's just what you had to do to go get to the data, which was in books in a library somewhere. And it's a much different world, a vastly different world now. But to your point, it's access, right? And rapidity of access. And you bring up several excellent points, which revolve around governance, and being able to throttle people. What if someone's doing something that they shouldn't be doing? Or what if someone is just taxing the system with queries and procedures that are not highly valuable to the business? I mean, that's something else that can cause some trouble, right? What was a funny quote I heard? The most ungoverned line in your IT budget is your AWS spend, right? Because all of a sudden something just blows up. I mean, they're getting a lot better about that. But you're right that it's a different world now that we live in, and we really have to challenge ourselves to think about what are the procedures and the policies and the protocols that we're going to embrace in order to responsibly leverage these assets, which are information in nature, right, Sarbjeet?
Yeah, I think perfect example is the Facebook's data. Once somebody gets all the sort of data, they download that onto their system. They can do whatever they want with it, right? So you don't have any control over that anymore. Versus if they were getting the data through APIs and you had the governance around it, you can throttle them, you can stop them from using it. And I think that's one aspect. Another thing is like there was a lot of companies spun up in the last about 6-7 years, maybe 10 years. They started to anonymize the data. These companies just did that job. Give us the data, we will help you anonymize the data. I used to work at Visa, and we used to anonymize the data ourselves, like in-house built tools. So because your credit card data should not be floating out there, but at the same time you need some data to cook up the applications for the banks and or for the card holders and stuff, like doing promotions and all that stuff. So I think that anonymizing that data it has a lot of value, especially in healthcare. Just imagine you can get all the patient data anonymized, and you can run all kind of analytics on that, and then find the patterns, like if somebody has cancer, this kind of cancer,
Sure.
what other things they have, and then all these permutations and combinations. You can help all these our researchers who are looking at the sort of looking for creating cure for cancer. You can speed that up if you
No doubt.
if you had access to all the data, access to DNA data, for example. Kaiser has donated that data to the community, healthcare community, to have at it, after anonymizing it. I think we have to do a lot more in that space.
It's been so much fun talking to Juan Cicada, Data.World, Sarbjeet Johal, Silicon Valley, and Richard Sherman of Athena Solutions. We'll talk to you next time, folks. Take care. Bye-bye.